So yeah, this is the last of our talks. I'm really pleased to be able to welcome Will Gregory, who you may know probably primarily from Goldfrapp, but as also a prolific media composer of music. Not many people know also, I would say, a virtuoso saxophonist as well.
In the past.
In the past, but you know, an unknown, probably something people don't know about you. I've known Will for years. We used to share a studio together. We've known him for a long time. And when I asked Will, I was curious as to what he might bring. Initially, you were talking about possibly the Polyvox, but then you went for the MS20. And I can imagine there were probably two reasons why. Perhaps one is it's a lot easier to transport and doesn't go wrong so much. And the other one is you've used it loads on stuff that people will probably have heard.
Yeah, and it's very versatile. It does a lot of things. I mean, there's a lot of things it doesn't do, but I think that's okay. You know, you get something else to do those. Like Adrian was talking about the Mini Moog. This is almost, I think, like the polar opposite. It does everything that a Mini can't do and vice versa. I
mean, by comparison, it's a very angry sounding instrument compared to the Mini. It's not what you call, I mean, it is capable of creamy and warm, but those twin filters are really what kind of make it scream. I mean, it's the scream, isn't it, that seems to be the initial sound that people might initially think of with an MS20.
The thing with the MS20 exactly is that it has these two filters. One is a low pass and one is a high pass. Okay, you think that's what a lot of synths have. I mean, you get those on Roland synths, you know, it has a little high pass thing, and it's this rather passive, weedy thing that just takes bottom end out.
Yeah.
But this is not that. This takes bottom end out and it puts something else in. And I mean, I think that's kind of what we should just be talking about with this instrument are these four knobs that sit in the middle here because they create the whole world that the MS20 is capable of. And what's interesting about them is that it makes them quite vocal sounding because, as you probably know, vocal sounds are to do with formants, which are to do with particular peaks in the sound. I mean, to kind of make a realistic vocal sound, you need 3 or 4, actually. This has only got 2, so it's not that kind of realistic, but it has this potential to sound quite human because of these kind of peaks that you can give the sound. So, for example, if I just take the bottom end off and just give you top end. So far, so good. But then I can turn up, see, that's already blowing up. So already it's talking a little bit because this incredible filter design. But the thing is that you've got this other one which works in parallel with it, which is the bottom end. So there we can take all the bottom end out like any other synth, but then you can put its own resonance in.
Very hard not to do filter mouth with this synthesizer, I think. Very hard.
Don't have any cameras on. Have you got cameras on?
No, there's nothing. It's all right. It's just a couple. The thing about the high pass as well, and this is something I didn't know. I mean, it was a recent, you know, the harmonics you can add with a resonant high pass filter far outweigh what you can do with an oscillator and a low pass filter. Just the level, the sub harmonics you can add with a decent bit of screech. Mm-hmm. And this is, you know, for drums, all sorts of things. I mean, it really does kind of make it sound massive.
This is it, you know, in the end, when you're playing with it, you gravitate towards the high pass filter, the thing that takes the low end out. I always get them mixed up. Is that the high pass or the
That's
low
the high
pass?
pass.
The high pass. So the bit that, you know, this is the one that really, and the thing is, if you really boost it, you can really, you know, take a PA out with it, actually, if you really want to. So you can tune it. And then, of course, you can modulate it.
It's that stuff, isn't it? Those kind of, it's almost ring moddy type of harmonics because they're so accentuated.
Yeah.
So there are 2 versions of the MS20 filter. apparently. And I can never remember this kind of stuff. I'm a terrible synth historian. It's not something but I remember because Korg reissued the Mini, MS20 Mini, and they had a little way you could boot it up so you could have one of two filters. Am I right there? Or is this something I'm imagining? Yes, it is. You could do that. And the same with the desktop. Perhaps we'll get onto that in a little bit. But on the face of it, without the filter, even though it's modular, it's actually not terribly... It hasn't got an awful lot else. I mean, but you've got the pitch tracking as well, which is something that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it just is about these filters. I mean, it's probably just I'm a bit lazy and I don't sort of go much further with it than that. Obviously, you've got other things which I will show you as we go through. But because of this filter, you can sculpt sound really quite dramatically. So, for example, if you wanted to, if I'm going to turn off, I'll just give it white noise for the moment. So if I was to make that short, so I've got a sort of rattly sound there, but you can kind of make a kick drum sound with it, quite blowing up your speakers.
This will be interesting whether this ever makes it onto the YouTube filter.
I don't think it will.
I think, yeah. Just imagine a really, really bassy sound at this point if you're watching this via your laptop speakers.
I did make one yesterday. Let's see what this is.
Okay, so over here you've got...
Oh, that's my snare. So this is just using white noise, and so that's,
and it's
out
also
of time.
No, but it's not only that. It's also got an inconsistency in the actual sound of it, so that you've got that kind of analog vibe to it.
Yeah, and you can play with it as you're doing it. So that's it. You can make everything with one instrument, which is always a kind of exciting challenge. So that's the little kick drum that I made, and just white noise. And then this is the snare. Excellent.
You can get quite a clappy sound there.
You can get a clappy sound, and I think I made a hi-hat. I mean, hi-hat.
Yeah, with a high-pass filter.
So you'd never be able to do that with a mini Moog. Probably don't want to, but... You can, but you need another you need a high-pass filter, right? Because you'll never get all the bottom end out of it. So yeah, you could do, but this does it straight away.
It's interesting though, because I mean, I've never really fathomed the patch bay. The patch bay makes absolutely no sense to me because it doesn't seem to route things that you want. Like we've said when we were starting out, it's got pulse width, but you can't access the pulse width. You have to twiddle it with your manually. There's no way of accessing that. So it feels like, well, why bother even putting that on the front panel if you can't do anything?
Well, because you can twiddle it. I suppose that's the answer. I mean, it is a twiddle machine, and you need to buy their extras to be able to twiddle it automatically. But I mean, I think that's the thing about it is it's a performance instrument in that you'll want to play with the sound as you're putting it down. You won't want to dedicate that to some external bit of sequencing. You'll want to be actually playing it. And of course, the great thing these days with hard disk recording is you can just, record yourself playing for 2 hours, and that one bar where you really nailed it, you can go back and find, which of course before hard disk recording you couldn't do, which is actually why I think these analog devices have had this huge renaissance. Is simply as something as basic as hard disk recording.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I mean I know certainly the way that Goldfrapp kind of put together, outside of the basic song structure, there's this sort of layering and finding and using analog synthesis and other instruments to find that little sweet spot. I mean, quite often, I've worked on the multi-tracks and it's literally a patchwork. You lose one thing and nothing else kind of works. It has to all fit together in that way, and it seems like that's the way that you tend to do things when you grab all that little articulation there, then that one, and then that one.
That seems to be the way these instruments are best utilized. And obviously it can be scary. And I remember mixing and Spike turning around to me and saying, okay, bass number 17. And me saying, yeah, sorry about that, Spike, because he's probably used to one bass. But the fact is, that bit of that bass sound is, from that jam that took 3 hours last Thursday, but you only use that 2-second bit of it. And that's why that's that's the fun that I have with it, you know, because you just want to play. You just want to play with the instrument while you're putting it down. I mean, it's like all other synthesizers, really, but particularly somehow with this one, for me, that's why it's a bit of a favorite. And it has this edgy, grungy, like you say, sound, really because of these filters. And we can talk about what the patch bay does. I've not really fathomed it out. Maybe it's because I'm getting a bit sort of short-sighted. But
well, it's interesting. The physicality of the synth as well. It sort of as it leans towards you, it makes it easier to perform. But you've got a pitch wheel, and you've got well, I don't know what that is, a trigger, isn't it? So you can use those things if you absolutely want to. But yes, generally one doesn't. One just kind of tunes the sound like that. But the other thing that I know, I don't know if you're familiar with the Goldfrapp track. Oh, that's hard to say. Lovely Head, which you use processing Alison's voice, because the pitch tracking in this is amazingly kind of wrong, but is very organic, isn't it?
I don't know why they put it on here, but yeah, they've given you a pitch to voltage section, which is along the bottom, and it's quite powerful because it has, obviously your level here, but you can roll the bottom end off. So, for example, if there's a lot of background sound, you can just take that out and just go for the higher frequencies, which it can then track more accurately. You've got CV adjust, which basically, when it's fully round, means it's in tune with what you're doing. I don't know if it'll work. It's a horrible noise when I do it anyway, but dun 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 dun. Well, that's probably because it's white noise, isn't it? Let's try. Yeah, so you can do that thing of.
But the thing is it's what's great about it also is it's the imperfection, the way when it struggles. Because when Alison was doing those kind of intervals, it kind of struggles to find the sound, and it's visceral. It really feels, particularly with the in that song, which has got sort of a certain emotive quality to it.
If you're a singer, I think this is for you. I mean, the thing is, you can actually, in the book that you get with it, says, it says guitar, so it'll track a guitar. But what's interesting, if you're a singer and you play with the overtones of your voice, it will track differently. So it'll warble between the very. I'm not going to demonstrate that because it would sound horrible. But if you are a singer, then it gives you this kind of inhuman, but somehow spookily human at the same time quality, which is somehow very evocative. And presumably, if you want to put an idea down and you can't quite manage it on the keyboard, you could just sing it in.
It's funny because for years that was the only way to do it, to get vocal to CV. There wasn't really any other kind of gear that would allow you to track.
No, not unless you bought an EMS something or other. They had various boxes, but this is all in-house. It's just all there. And it also means that you can use the input as a trigger. So if you are wanting to say, add something to your drum sounds, you can get it to trigger off a bass drum or whatever. You use it as an audio trigger.
Well, when I also remember when you were performing with Goldfrapp, where Alice would sing the line and you would be actually doing it, and then when you weren't on the road, there was a guy on the side who you'd sort of shown how to articulate the filter to get that sound to it as well.
That's right, and I think that for her, what was going on here was informing what she was doing. So it was really a kind of duet. So it was a lovely sort of moment when what I was doing and what she was doing sort of came together, because she would respond to how the sound was acting as well. So, it's quite a good improv kind of machine. I think it's great. It's just got all this live potential. I had to stop myself yesterday because I had to go home. But I was just, I don't know if I can just... if anybody wants to come up and have a play with it...
It is interesting also because there is very little actual usable modulation in it. The envelopes are weird and they're sort of the wrong way round what you want. But there's plenty of stuff there. And that's with there's a tiny bit of resonance on the low pass, so on the high pass filter, and that's still got tons of bottom end.
Oh yeah, but that's when you can really dial it in.
And then you can just amplify it even more. There's not enough bottom end on this synthesizer. It's not often. Let's add some more.
More. I mean, that could be your baseline snare, couldn't it? I don't know what I was doing with this. I mean, you know, just stop me because I'm just.
But the other thing that's quite interesting about it is I used to use it a lot for just one specific thing, which was just a sort of like a filtery 303 thing. But I remember using the ring mod in it's quite interesting as well, isn't it?
The ring mod is very good. It's sort of not as destructive as some. So that's.
And it's very pitched as it should be, but you can get some beautiful.
But also the modulation section is very quick and easy, should you want it to be.
That sounds more wasp than a wasp.
I discovered this thing the other day. If you actually put a bit of release on, it will sort of. It will sort of droop. The EG follows the pitch. There we go. Yeah.
It's most unusual.
Stop.
So
I'll just be here all night.
So I mean, I'm just trying to think of the only thing that I found really quite a revelation. I reviewed the desktop. The MS20 desktop, which was again a kit form, and they modified the basic architecture of the MS20. And I used to use the MS20, you know, in my setup, but they added pulse width modulation and they added oscillator sync, and they also added the ability to play it more duophonically because it's quite hard to separate the two CVs, and now you can do that. So, in my opinion, that's the finest iteration of the MS20. I don't know about how good the filter or anything, but certainly in architecture, it really did. It does. It works
I agree.
very well.
Those are missing ingredients, 100%. Not to have pulse width modulation. I'm not sure how often one should say that to anybody but oneself. Seems a crime, and. But then again, it just makes you wobble it, and what's quite nice is that you can, you can take it right out if you need to. You can actually use it as a kind of filter. Why is that not disappearing? Pulse width. So yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. That's the through zero effect. That's the one.
Yeah, that's where you're just.
So when did you first? I mean, was this one of your first synthesizers? I mean,
yeah, it was actually.
Was
yeah. Funnily enough, Adrian sold it to me.
You'd had your way with it already.
He had another one. I think it wasn't like he didn't want it. He just. Yeah. So I'd had a Mini Moog for a time before that, but I was too poor to hold on to it. I had to sell it. So this was a way back in, because at that point they were, I don't know, a tenth of the price of a Mini. And so there it was, yeah. And you were absolutely right, I did. Once I had it, I was away.
So when do you now reach for this? I mean, is it something that, you know, because I know you've got, you know, a large collection of stuff. I mean, you don't have it all on and in the room and available at the time. You tend to sort of rotate things. Is this one of the things that doesn't get rotated very often, or?
Well, I tend to use it now as a processor more than a sound source. So quite often I will put drums through it and, you know, give it this filter treatment so you can really pick out the frequency that you want in your drum sample and make it individual. I will also you trigger it and just use the white noise to do that. I also do like using this pitch to voltage thing. In fact, we just did a project, Adrian and I, for a film called Arcadia, where we were lucky enough to get some old recording of Annie Briggs, this amazing folk singer. And we wanted to use her at the early part of the film, which was all this lovely British countryside. And then later in the film, it becomes more dystopian. So I put her through this, and she ended up sounding like this kind of warbling banshee. And she luckily didn't mind. So, so processing vocals, it's also a fantastic device for that. Giving, you know, obviously you have to have a broad-minded vocalist, but I think that they're just very exciting. And I'm still not at the end of it. As I say, I don't really understand what any of this does, except that I'm looking forward to getting some more patch leads and finding out.
Yes, well, I think that's a good place to leave things, actually. But, Will, thank you so much for showing us about the Korg. I mean, as we know, it's been used on a lot of stuff. I know you process Alison's voice a lot. I mean, were you using the EMS as well? Yeah,
we had the EMS going. But this, because, I mean, what's interesting is you pitch to voltage and use the real vocal and you do it alongside. You know, that's another whole game to play. You know, then you can really get into this. Is it one voice? Is it two? How is somebody 1 minute sounding like a normal person, next minute sounding like a cat on acid or whatever it is, you know? And you can just play with it. I mean, it's a you know, fantastically versatile machine. I mean, all in this little box. I mean, it comes out of this period of Japanese, what they call it, the economic miracle, isn't it, in the 80s, the early 80s and late 70s. And to have put all this together in one box, I don't know what it's from. Is it 76, 77?
77, I think.
It's just the most opulent, generous...
We crowdsourced that one, Simon? 77, 78, yes.
Thing, I don't think we'll see its like again. Well, apart from the reissue.
Yeah. Will, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody.